Okay, so we're still running in our project basically that is completely untouched. We just installed it, had it basically sit there in development mode. So the next thing, so I'm going to let this terminal run and just open up a new one. The next thing I'm going to talk about is how credentials work in neoan3. So there is a command called neoan3 credentials. So in my case, it lists already saved credentials. If you get an error here, then that likely means that you have some kind of read and write problem on the on your file system, right? So what it's trying to do is it's trying to write a file called credentials.json in the root folder credentials. So what does that mean? Let me actually open up Linux here quickly. So when you are in the root, right, and then you say, and actually let me see, is that, do you even have that? I don't have that. Okay, so if for whatever reason this doesn't work, which luckily here I haven't set that up here on the Linux version, and the same is true for, well, actually you probably want to do that with a soft link on Mac with the newest Mac version. But what you do, or you could in theory have that issue on Windows too, right? What you do is you create credentials, apparently with sudo, credentials, a folder, oops, sorry, what? Oh, sudo make directory credentials. Okay, and if you have that, then the only thing you want to do is to basically create, or actually let's do this with sudo nano credentials dot, oops, credentials dot JSON. There we go. Just create an empty JSON. And make sure it's read and writable by your PHP. So in my here again that's on Windows you will not have that issue, but for example on Linux what you want to do here is probably change that, right, and say okay, www data, which is the regular thing, and actually make that recursive, and then say credentials. Okay, and then the problem should be solved for you. So if you don't get an error, then likely you will only have this create new credentials. And depending on your system, you could actually see create new credentials even though you have no access to that root level, so the error will happen later. So instead of actually, I'm going to close this now with Control-C. Instead of actually going to choose credentials now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a database. Okay, so that's going to do a couple of steps in one. So I'm going to say neoan3 new database, and we're going to call this video underscore db actually. Okay, so I'm going to go X for new credentials, and I'm going to call those credentials also video db, right? That's what I want to call them. Okay, so the host is localhost, the name is video db, that's what I entered before. So here the user, that depends on what your SQL user is, right? The password also depends. In my case it's empty. The port's likely going to be this default port, and here is the first interesting thing. So assumes your UID. That's how we want our primary keys to work. So I'm going to leave that as true, right? So also simply hit enter. Okay, so I get this. So next time when I say neoan3 credentials, I will basically now have, see that on line 7 and the video DB. So if I actually go to 7 now, I can basically see what kind of stuff is stored, and we can read that within the environment later, and how that works I'm going to show you. So I'm going to close this for now, and I'm going to open up the default frame. So the component that you're creating, right, they're going to use a frame, and in my frame, if I go here, do you see where it says on line 30 in this version? Oh, and why does this happen? Hold on. Let me actually make sure that we're using PHP 7.4. All right. So can actually do typing, right? On line 30, this is where I want to make the change, right? This is at least true in this version here, right? So I'm going to change this to video DB. And this is used in the provider, right? You see this? So at the end of the day, the provider DB creates a database with the credentials of this credentials, right? Which is exactly what we're doing here. So from that moment forward, we should have access to our database. And you know what? We are going to kind of try that out. So what I ran the command create a database video DB. So I should actually have this. If this fails, so that sometimes what happens, and this also highly depends on how your SQL user rights and privileges are set up. So sometimes it will create the credentials but not the database. In that case, just go to whatever you use, your workbench, your PHP admin, whatever you're using, and create the database manually. In my case, that should have worked. So in my PHP Storm, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new data source here. In that case, that's MariaDB, and that's localhost. The user is root. I have no password, and we're going to call this video DB. So let's see if that connection works. Yep. So that was created. Let's apply that, and of course, it's a completely empty database, right? Let's get this out of the way, right? Completely empty database, but at least we have a database connection. So that's what I want to do. And since we're already here, so you probably noticed that the assign provider happens twice, right? Once here for auth and once here for DB. So in our auth, what we want to do is, in our case, instead of a session wrapper, we're going to change this and say this is actually a JWT wrapper. And here the set secret is probably something that we also don't want to have in our source code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create credentials for that. So I'm going to go down here and say neoan3 credentials. I'm going to again go to X for create new credentials, and now I'm going to say video underscore secret. What is the name of this property? I'm going to call this the name of this property key, and the value I'm actually simply going to whatever, right? Okay, and no, I'm fine, and this works just like a charm. So okay, fair enough. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move this get credentials out here. So this can fail, as you can see, and I want it to fail if this doesn't work, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply add this to throw tag here, and then get rid of this here. And of course what we would need to do in this case is here in the assign provider, I'm going to say use credentials, and here where it says my secret, I'm going to say credentials. In that case, what did I call this? I kind of forgot. Video secret, right? Video secret key. Okay, and then here I'm going to also simply say use credentials. Oops. And I already moved it out of here. And in that case, I don't require the try catch block anymore, right? Okay. So far, so good. Okay, so this might change a little bit until the release. So who knows if this is what you're actually going to see, but that does not matter. The important point is that we have our system, set up accordingly. Yeah, that is it from the standpoint of credentials. So now we basically have, instead of environment variables, which is something that you might have, heard or been used to, this now runs based on a file that is in the root, so no web access, and we can basically now read the video secret, the secret key in here, and it's safe to deploy that on GitHub and whatever, and nobody can see the actual used credentials of our database or our JWT. So far so good, and I guess I should probably explain at the end why do we need this, why do we even have this assignment here, assign provider, and the idea is of course to say we're going to look into testing pretty soon, and how do we decouple like database wrappers in a way where we can use them in an injected format. So far so good. Let's see if everything still runs. So let's go over here, and as you can see, everything seems to be still okay. We still have the same kind of output that we always had. So far so good, and I guess I see you in the next video.